So hello guys. I'm back with another episode with a wonderful guest, Victoria. Victoria is here, and we had done a long and really wonderful video that I referred to in a lot of the recent live streams, and Victoria has agreed to join us for a follow up. So on to you, Victoria.
Thank you, Rosie. And I am grateful once again for your kind sort of kindness and letting me come on and express my point of view from an astrological basis. And I really wanted to discuss just a little bit more about Pluto and its important influence in this, what we're experiencing right now as a country. And I've sent along to you the graphics of how we
Sorry.
how we that's all right. How we as a country are experiencing a major what we call transit in astrology, which is where the planets are now compared to where they were when the idea of America was born on July 4th, 1776. Again, I will reiterate that a lot of people use the Constitution chart, which is also very important, but I am not using that in this instance, and I'm using the July 4th date. I just want to remind your listeners what Pluto is all about, whether it's a situation or a person that you come into contact with. They can work from the lower levels to the higher levels of expression. Each of the planets can bring great positive change, or they can be destructive. And Pluto is perhaps one of the most either positive or destructive, if not the most positive or destructive, of all of our astrological symbols. So at the lower level, it are people like criminals, those people who prey on people's dark sides. The next level are people who fight against crime, like detectives or investigators and things of that nature, or people who help others deal with the dark side of life. So people who perhaps shepherd you through a loss in your life, a death in your life, people like therapists or certain types of coaches. And then the higher levels of Pluto people are those who are transformers. They help us evolve as a person. They help us evolve as a society, and they take a stand despite any threat of retaliation, any threat that, perhaps, you might lose your job or you might lose your relationship. You know that you need to take a stand, and you do. All of the people that are Pluto realize that they're inhabiting a dangerous situation or they're walking on dangerous ground. But the higher level of consciousness people are compelled to respond to circumstances with their impulses in control. A lot of people who don't handle Pluto very well, or who handle it unconsciously, kind of have a knee-jerk gut reaction of threatening somebody else. So basically, the rule of thumb that we use when we're talking about Pluto, the higher level people are masters of themselves, their impulses, their id, their issues. And the lower level people tend to want to master or control other people. They want to tell you what to do. They want to dominate the situation, possibly at the furthest end of the negative side of Pluto, to the point of abuse and control of that nature. So the phrases that you might hear when you see Pluto going on in the dialogue that we have right now with the Trump administration or in your personal life, at the lower levels, there are things like, I'm going to give you an offer you can't refuse. Or, are you talking to me? That kind of stuff. So think of the mob movies you've seen, and you could basically have the dialogue. So think of what the president of Ukraine heard on the other end of the call when he was getting a shakedown from Trump on July 25th, when Mercury and Pluto were an aspect. So a phone call is Mercury. Mercury rules communication. I think we discussed this in our last video. And Pluto is this very sort of compulsive, compelling, intense, id-like response, and it
Mhm.
brings people into their survival instincts. You know, Ukraine is literally at threat from outside forces, and so you know, you have to recognize when you're speaking to somebody who's, like, say for example, been a victim of rape or been a victim of something, um, the way that they're going to react to a threat, whether it's implied or very obviously said, is going to be different than someone who has not experienced that and who perhaps feels in a stronger position. So, you know, again, Mercury and Pluto together can mean a threat of extortion of some sort, which I think clearly is what was going on in, you know, in that phone call with the Ukrainian president. Then when you're looking at people who are like Crime Stoppers, investigators, legitimate law enforcers, detectives, people who are often forced into difficult situations, you know, they're trying to arrest people in the mob or they're trying to deal with drug lords. They also require extraordinary strength and control. Some of the phrases you might recognize, you know, from film or whatever, is Liam Neeson's favorite phrase. You know, I have a particular set of skills. You know, I'm kind of a dangerous guy. You know, it's sort of, but you know, you say it in a very understated way. It's not sort of over the top, like, you know, I'm going to put a horse's head in the bed kind of thing.
Mhm.
Or maybe a little more threatening is payback is a bitch, you know.
Mhm.
Or if you're feeling like you're strong, but you're not quite that strong, you're going to say, I'm going to survive through this no matter what. But that still gives a sense of personal gravitas, personal um, gumption in some way. And finally, the voices of those people who transform society by telling the truth or taking a stand no matter what are people like the whistleblower, people like Marie Jovanovic, people of that nature who will say, okay, my job might be at threat. I work for some place that's told me I can't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. And I'm going to stand behind and do this. So certainly during the period when a lot of these people were testifying, Pluto was active. Um,
Mhm.
and I gave some dates in the last reading, which I won't go over again. But if you want to, you can go back and look at some of those dates that I discussed. And I wanted to mention the type of hero because I think we have several people that could help us deal with this difficult time. And one of the people could be a positive Pluto person. Um, we'll certainly, excuse me, run into some negative Pluto people, and we already have, like, you know, Trump who threatens people or things like that. Um, but I think we'll also have some positive Pluto people that will come in. And the most famous Pluto sort of hero is Hercules out of mythology.
Mhm.
And so, you know, he was famous for cutting off the heads of the Hydra, and then more heads would sprout up. So there's often a feeling that things are getting worse as you start cutting the heads off instead of better. And it was only once he lifted the creature out of the swamp, he was able to kill it. And then there was there's this beautiful jewel that was found at the end. So there's always a payoff at the end of a Pluto struggle, but it comes at the end. And these Pluto struggles do last quite a long time. Um, he also had to clean I don't know how to pronounce it, but the Augean stables, which were basically, these horses had been kept in there and the stables had never been cleaned. So there's this element of cleaning up toxic things,
Mhm.
whether these are toxic thoughts, whether they're actual, you know, nuclear waste, things of that nature. You know, there's a need to clean things up. And also some of the terms that you might hear when people are Pluto people, whether they're positive or negative, often are scatological, so you might get people referencing refuse in some way, or, um, you know, things like that. Or they could be sexual, or they could be macho. It's a very sort of uh, kind of, I would say often a very, not a very intellectual or gentle or sensitive or compassionate way of communicating. It's often just very to the point, and the higher level people make their point by looking at you in the eye and saying, this is the way it is. They don't threaten you, they just look into you, and it's almost as if they look straight through you, and they know who you are, they know where your weaknesses are, and they have to say what they say no matter what. The lower level people, make some sort of threat and often use bad language and all this kind of stuff. And you notice that Trump now is starting to use swear terms, which I think a lot of his base don't really care for very much. I'm sure they don't. But as his communication level, as he gets more and more threatened, and the survival instinct comes out in him, he's going to tend to start to mirror some of these Pluto, on the negative side, Pluto qualities. So I just wanted to reiterate that. And I wanted to make one final point, and we're going to look at some dates in just a minute, Rosie, of the financial piece that is not quite been put into focus yet. I think it seems to be the Mazar suit, which is the first thing that looks like it's going to offer his financial records, his taxes, and so on. That is part of this Pluto and Saturn equation that we discussed the last time. Because in Mercury and Pluto, which are the things that you can see that go across the screen on the chart that we've shown you, are going through the second and eighth houses, which are the financial houses, which have to do with income, debts, and taxes. So I wanted to take a look at a couple of the dates in the past related to the Mazar's case, and then project through Rosie and through Rosie's help a couple of dates that are coming up that could bring the final decision associated with the Mazar's case.
May I interject just one thing, Victoria? Just because when I first remember Mazars, and then because there may be people who don't remember what Mazars is.
Okay.
So Mazars is, and please, you must know more than I do, but if I recall correctly, it's Trump's. They did a lot for a long time. They've been doing Trump's tax returns, and they're based in Chicago. And there was a raid into them. Remember, this was like a year ago or something, right? Is that right, Victoria? Anything else? Right? Is that what it is? Right?
Well, they did. Yeah, they did. They had access to his financial and tax records, and I believe it was on February 27th when Michael Cohen was testifying in front of Congress. He mentions Mazars, and so I looked into that date for the first time, and the aspect that was going on at that time was Venus contacting Pluto, and that shows up very closely in Trump's chart. And so often Pluto shows what is there. It brings into the light of consciousness what has been hidden, what has been underground. So my feeling is that it was the suit. There was an amicus brief that was filed basically to start the case on July 1st, and Venus wasn't there, but Saturn and Pluto were there. So my question to you will be, when we get in a moment to looking at the two dates, which is more likely to bring about a final court decision associated with this case. Is it Venus Pluto or is it Saturn Pluto? And we will look at that in a minute. But I wanted to mention the reason why I'm sort of focusing in on this is that the suit, as I read a little bit about before we spoke today, involves the power to investigate. Investigation is run by Pluto, and power is, again, what Pluto stands for in a chart. And the power to investigate the executive branch is something that Congress has been given as one of their powers. So that's one of the things that's being tested, as well as the history of this kind of oversight. History is always referenced, in my view, associated with Saturn. So to me, the fact that these are two of the main points in the suit, basically, the arguments that we've been listening to about, if our president, whoever he might be, in this case it's Trump, will kill somebody on Fifth Avenue, could you, pick him up, process him for murder and so on.
So just so I understand it correctly, Victoria. So this, because I remember this correctly. So I know that there's this lawsuit transiting the legal system, and that it was even a couple of days ago. It was live on C-SPAN, the audio. So is this? So I didn't realize it was the Mazars case.
Yeah.
Is that it? Because I thought it was thought it was just about whether the president's tax return, was it tax information. I didn't realize it came from this specific.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's my understanding.
No, that's great, because I thought, that's right, because it happened just, I mean, I think it just will be a review for others and not even for me. So this is when the Congress wanted to get that information, and Trump, he said, his lawyers or whatever, told the firm, the Mazars, they couldn't. Is that right? And started fighting the government. I mean, the government fighting the government, but fighting the House, right? Like, oh no, but you can't. And so the judges are like, really? So he could shoot anybody, and that should be it.
Right.
That's okay. So perfect, makes sense. Okay, now okay, go ahead.
So basically, so that's one thing that I think this Pluto is about. I think we discussed last time, some of the dates that were potentially associated with the whistleblower. I think I mentioned to you there was probably more than one, probably likely two areas that were going to be part of his downfall, one of which probably had to do with the whistleblower stuff. And the other, I think, has to do with the sort of financial piece, which seems to be the first test case that might come out about this, might be this Mazars case, because it's right now it's at the Court of Appeals, right? It was at the Second Circuit, I think, which is, isn't it New York? Anyway, so so the shooting on Fifth Avenue thing happened when the sun was an aspect to U.S. Pluto. So Pluto really is, do you have power over life and death? That very literally is what Pluto is. Pluto was Pluto Hades, the god, mythological god of the underworld. Will the president have power over life and death if he takes those actions himself? Can he shoot someone? So, I mean, I think we should take it very literally, not that he's going to start picking up a firearm, because I don't think he has it in him, really. I think he's more of a bully. But, does he have this power? So I think that's another thing that's going to be very important as we go forward. So I want to look at two things. Two dates. Where are my dates? Here we go. So to project forward, there's a thought that chances are, if the Court of Appeals does not rule in favor of Trump, which it's suspected that it won't, that we'll go to the Supreme Court. I looked at the docket just for the heck of it. I don't know much about the courts. I'm not a lawyer myself. And but the timing for Venus and Pluto together, which is the same time as when Michael Cohen initially testified about Mazars in front of Congress back in February of this year, will be the dates between December 13th and December 20th. The problem is, and we'll look at this right now with Rosie, is that it appears that the court is on Christmas break, basically. At that.
Yes.
So, will it be then, or the next set of dates will be that January 13th date when Saturn and Pluto come together, which is related to the beginning of the proper lawsuit back on July 1st of this year. And, it could be either one of those dates. So I was going to ask you to look and see what your cards bring up on the first set of dates, which is Venus Pluto.
Okay. So, and by the way, Victoria, I feel like it's kind of like a messy here. I'll just show the cards, okay? There's not going to be, and I'll do vision also. So what we'll do is just do kind of a comparison, okay?
Okay.
So just to clarify the question about those dates. So which one is likelier that this lawsuit is going to probably go, basically you think that it's going to go to the Supreme Court by then, is that right?
Yeah.
So is it likely to go between December 13th and 20th or January 13th? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is it? Victoria, I mean, you're not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer either.
Yeah, I know, really.
But because you know what I'm
Nowadays,
getting?
we need a third face on here.
Well, like, no, it'd be interesting if it's like, oh, hello, can we call? So it'd be nice. Hello, can I ask you a question?
Can I call with Jill Weinbank?
Yeah. Oh my God, I was exactly gonna say that. Oh, you know one. Okay.
She's in Chicago.
Yeah, I was like, what's so funny? I said, Jill is like, because one day I wrote to her. I was like, I love you. She's like, I was like, she wrote me back.
Oh.
Like, I love you. She's so cute. I was like, oh my God. Because I mentioned her hair. She had like one day she had the best lipstick color. It was so flat. She's beautiful. And it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
but like,
lovely.
I was like, oh my God, I love her. Anyway, it'd be amazing if we. But anyway, but I was just this is why I ask, because you know what I see right away. I just have this flash, Victoria, before I even look at the cards. I see that there's some sort of extraordinary session, like almost as if they decide to go to kind of, just how sometimes it happens in the Senate and in the House. It happens like instead of having a break, they decided this needs to be heard sooner rather than later. Okay. So let's, I don't know, but let's see. I'm going to see. So what's going on with the case? That is it going to be, let's say, early or later, January or December, basically? Okay. Yeah. So January. Okay. So. Okay, and then we'll see, because now actually I have these types of cards here have a lot of legal cards, so that's very good for this. Okay, so which one? Okay, so which one is gonna? Okay, so okay, so I'm just here. Just what is this? Okay, so because let me just see here. Actually, 1 second. So the gallery view. No. Oh, I want to click on here. Boy. I don't know. I don't know. Because I'm used to seeing the screen. It's like tiny. So anyway, so this is the magician first. Magician. The man. Oh, born man. Something. Hopeless. Oh no. No. Money losses. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Okay. So. Oh, prison. I'm so sad. So sad. Oh no. Okay. So. Okay. Now, the question is. Okay. So it looks like, by the time, in other words, by the time December comes, okay, so by the time December comes, it's not going to, so now, okay, so I tell you what, Victoria, about this card here, I get this card a lot. I haven't been using cards in the last couple of weeks very much, but very recently I see this card a lot. It's a card of money losses, permanent, and when it always rings back to Trump's bankruptcies and how it was the time when he was bankrupt that he had to resort to foreign money. So we have the foreign card here, and that's when he got the Russian money for sure. Okay, so I'm getting also the words restructurings due to bankruptcy. So I feel like now this card here is the Magician. These two are really very positive. And this is a card of power. It means it's sort of the alchemist card, turning thoughts into reality, having the greater power, bigger power than just sort of the Emperor card. It's power in every sense. Okay, and then the happiness. So I feel like if I were to just understand the cards here, it just talks about how this information is going to come out related to what happened when he had a bankruptcy and how he took foreign money. Now, it doesn't show me the court, so I need to, let's look at then that'll be January next. Okay, oh, yeah, so but let's see. Interesting, okay. So are they gonna hear, okay. Waiting. Yeah, you know what okay, so what I get immediately, and this is why cards sometimes are not perfect for this. This is interesting because this is like sort of what this set here reminds me of the stuff you always talk about, Pluto, and the dark underworld stuff of Pluto, because you have the moon upside down is a really kind of a bad card. It's like madness, but also stuff that's done in the dark. And this is these are plans. This is a man holding the world. So this sort of I think of it as sort of, this is also a card of planning. So the dark plans that happen in the darknet, like in the middle of the night, and this is a sick man, and this is the agreement. So to me, when I see this, the impression I have, this is gloomy thoughts and waiting or expectation. I think it's that the truth about Trump's agreement, whatever the true quid pro quo was that we know exists, there's no evidence as of yet, it's out. You know what I mean? The fact that he made the deal when he was desperate, and he had the bankruptcy, he had to resort to this. So still, it doesn't. So I just need to know. So where's the Supreme Court in all of this? And how? Oh my God! And how are they gonna? Oh, you know what, Victoria? I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to just. You know what it is? I have this robot. I have a robot. I have to pause 1 second because it starts by itself. I forgot. It's programmed to start working. I'm sorry. Okay, 1 second. I'll be right back. I'm gonna pause the recording. Okay, so I'm back. So I had to step out, guys, because I have a robot. It's a vacuum cleaner that starts alone. So anyway, so going back here. So what I was saying is that there's this picture that's pretty clear here, but where does the Supreme Court stand on this? Oh, interesting. Victoria, do you know if there's a possibility that the Supreme Court will refuse to hear the case? I heard about this about something. I don't know if it was this, but I see RGB say doing this, like, what is the word? Sort of like dismissing it. Dismiss, like,
which means that the Court of Appeals ruling will stand.
Yeah, because what I see
does this, or they do this.
Yeah, it's not even and it's not the sense of like, you know, like I do, like I dismiss him because I don't know. She's like, they're sort of like saying it would pass, or you know, the gesture here is I pass or pass along. There's no emotion, you know what I mean? It's not as if they're, obviously that's their job is not to have the emotion, but it's just, it's like passing on. So let me actually look at the judges that would probably be like the quote unquote the day. Go ahead.
There's another option that it's potentially not Mazars. There's another option that around those dates somebody comes out, like a whistleblower working for the IRS or someone else, that would give testimony about his financial situation. That is another possibility.
So because I see what I see here, I also looked at, because I looked at Clarence Thomas. That would be a good kind of like, that would be a benchmark for the conservative position, I think. So, and he's like this. He's like, no, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to see. And I feel like it's like, I don't know if he can recuse, obviously, no, not recusing himself, but saying something like he's not gonna, it's almost as if he doesn't want the conservatives to be mad at him. But I just feel like they don't, it's like a well, obviously it's a huge issue, but for them, for some reason, I get a sense that it's a non-issue. It's not worth our time, or it's pretty obvious, or like there's no need to have a discussion about this, okay? Like, because it's what he's asking for, it sounds kind of ridiculous. There's something there, like it's not a thing, okay, for them.
Right.
So okay, so then,
well, so that would be, you know, that would work too. You know, that would work in a very different way.
But let's see, you know what, maybe we should, if you don't mind, Victoria, because I don't want to take up too much of your time, because it's about your insights, okay, mostly. But I can also ask here, which I think would be interesting, because from the cards and the vision, I feel like I don't think it is the Supreme Court is going to do something, is going to basically touch this. It's all beyond them. And then, but at the same time, the sense I get is this explodes. In other words, the information that we know about that Trump has been trying to hide all along comes out. So maybe I should ask now, just quickly, is like, how is this? Because you're saying like it's like we could ask, is this case the case that's going to take him down as far as financial information is concerned, or something else? Because
Right.
the problem, Victoria, is that if I feel like they could even, you know how his whole life has been litigating everything. So if it's established that this information can come out, because I always see when it comes out, it's over for him. He can't look at anybody in the eye anymore. So then is this information going to come out? You know what I mean? Because they could argue that like, oh, but you know, if newspapers publish this, it's illegal. You know, they could do whatever, but I feel like it could be just because if it's established that yes, the information can go to the House or whoever. And I did remember seeing Adam Schiff with the stuff, you know, holding something. So let me see, how is this thing going to end? You know, what is going to be the final outcome of this?
With the financial piece.
Yeah, with the financial piece, the Mazars case, right? What is going to be? So how is this going to be solved? How is this going to be? So let's go to that. So let's go to this. Let's say go to December here 13th, right? I have here December 13th.
There. Yeah.
So let's get a December 13th. Where are we going to be in terms of this case? Where are we going to be? Trump is dead. I feel like there's more stuff that's come out, but he's desperate. He's hoping that this is the last saving grace, or the last thing, even though there's more information about finances of Turkey and other foreign countries, not just Ukraine. There's like the Ukraine things actually seems relatively smaller once more stuff comes out. Yeah. And he's hoping that if at least he can block the stuff about Russia, which is his finances, right? How he's owned by Russian oligarchs, then maybe. But then I feel like that's what I see. I feel like that week, or I don't know how it happens. So how does it happen? So there's another one. I think there may be another. I don't know if I think there's another court right after this one that just happened. There's another one. There may be another one, I think, Victoria, that is not the Supreme Court. I think maybe. I don't think the next stop is the Supreme Court necessarily. I think
this is the Court of Appeals right now. They're in the Second Circuit. They haven't ruled yet. They had the
because there's a more thing, and they're going to be no. So it goes to this is the thing about the Supreme Court. It goes to the Supreme Court docket. I don't know how to explain it. Like, they goes to the docket, they have a discussion about it, and they decide not to take it. They're like, it stands. They don't even, it's like it doesn't warrant very much discussion there, because they're like, oh, whatever, it stands by. Like, it's a non-thing for them. So at what time, when are they going to do this? So they're going to do this in Thanksgiving, early December. For some reason I don't know, December 7th. I don't know what day that is, but that's the day when they have to slot into the schedule, I think, or they have some sort of debate, or they meet up to decide what they're going to do about it. And by the time that happens, because I did see or sense or something like that, Victoria, that by the time after Thanksgiving is like, it's like trying to, you know, those movies when somebody's going to fall from a cliff and they're holding onto the cliff, and that's like the only way they can survive. That's kind of how it is. Like, it feels like it's like, now you're going to try to hold on to the cliff, and he's hoping that, you know, and that's kind of like, it just goes downhill, because, you know, he's committed so many crimes. So is that okay? Now I think I kind of understand. So is that the case that's gonna like nail the final nail in the coffin for him? Yes, because you're going to have the truth about who he is. Who is Trump? Is saying, who is Trump? Look at the finances. Like, he's an actor. Like, he's an actor who's acting like he has money. His whole persona is about somebody that is not real. Right? And when you look at his finances, you see that he does not have very much money, because it sounds like, it's almost like, for example, I guess that the example I'm getting here, imagine a person who's like, CEO of a public company, with some exceptions, like Mark Zuckerberg and a few others. Most CEOs, even though they're the head of the company, they make a lot of money relative to the worth of the company. They are not the owners of the company. So similarly, Trump is a figurehead, or he has a role in managing some sort of a company, but he's not the actual owner when you know what I'm saying. So it's
Yeah.
something that's what I feel like it shows. And I feel like I'm getting this number. It's weird. Like, so he owns at most 13% of the company that bears his name. It's saying that everything else and all the other businesses go to the, the own, or the if it's true, because I know, for example, I've looked a lot into like Silicon Valley cap tape, long story, but basically in those cases, the owners, when you take money from an investor, the person owns your company proportionally. So that makes perfect sense, right? If they give him the money, it's not a debt situation where this is what I think. It's not like they gave him money and he owes them back. It's like, we own your company, and that is the condition of the investment. You know what I mean? It's like, usually in the past, it was like, well, the banks would lend him money, and that's one thing. But what they said to him, we lend you money, but we own it, which makes sense. Like, from a financial perspective, if a person is so risky, then, and that's, oh my God, that makes perfect sense. But then that's how they can control the book, so they can use it to, you know what I mean? And I said before in one reading, Victoria, this is reminding me that this is how they do the money laundering, because they need to get projects going so that the investment money can come in. It doesn't even matter how it ends. It's all about getting the money, like, and that's why there has to be a lot of foreign projects, because that is how you're gonna, anyway. So that's is that it, yeah, that's it, because unless there's a final ruling, Trump is gonna go on his whole life. He learned from Roy Cohn that he's gonna sue people for anything and everything all the way, because most people don't have the money to pay for lawsuits and don't want to. Everybody hates it. So, and that's the end for him. He meets, because it's sort of like, as you were saying earlier, Victoria, that it's sort of like those people are always pushing the boundaries. You see, even with this thing, we're going to investigate the investigators, right? The Russia thing that came out yesterday. Let's see who is always. I was telling people yesterday, this image of like like not Pluto, but like, he's like, am I God? Am I really? I'm God. If I'm God, then why was there anything I can't do? Right? That is what it shows. And then he meets the end. It's like, well, no, you're not God, because there's somebody at one point, there's a limit. Okay, so that takes you down. So anyway, sorry, no, Victoria, I don't want to like take over, like I said, from your,
No, not at all. No,
because
that
I
makes
think,
a lot
but
of
I
sense.
think that, right, it
And I
answered.
think I think the other thing, and you mentioned this, which I think is also something for us to think about
Hmm.
as we go forward. And I did give again those dates on Pluto.
Hmm.
Um, on it was October 14th was one of the dates that I gave last time, I believe.
Hmm.
And that was when Sun and Pluto were in aspect. And that was the day that Mick Mulvaney admitted the quid pro quo. So he just came out and said it. I mean, so the sun always gives you the light of consciousness. It shows you what's really going on, which I think most of us suspected or thought was true. And it begs the question, which is the one you mentioned, um, the Turkey decision. One assumes there was some sort of quid pro quo with that as well. Um, exactly how we find out about that, it could be through another Pluto transit. Again, I mentioned a couple more
Hmm.
coming up.
Hmm.
Um, but that could be another nail in the coffin, because certainly um, the quid pro quo is Pluto related. So
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah. So okay. So we've talked about those dates. Now let's look at Neptune,
Hmm.
another very very important planet.
Hmm.
It has been becoming active more and more and more. And it's a planet that Trump tends to use a lot. So once I just start describing the things associated with Neptune, you'll recognize how much he uses it. Again, every planet can be used at a higher level or a lower level. He tends to use it again at a lower level. And let me describe what Neptune means. And it's an aspect of the planet Mars in the US chart. Um, and I will also, discuss what that means. In this particular case, Mars means it means the energy that it takes to motivate you to get out of your chair and do something, to compete, to be aggressive, to be competitive, to fight, to be independent. It is what gives us extra juice and
Hmm.
passion about our lives. It's associated with the sign of Aries, and it's very refreshing energy on the higher levels. On the lower levels, it tends to be very combative. They get into dominance. I would say Mars is baby Pluto. So,
Mm-hmm.
it sort of has a feeling of Pluto, but Mars has more heat. Like Aries, people tend to be fiery, whereas Pluto and their Scorpio counterparts, which is a sign associated with Pluto, tends to be more icy. Like revenge is a dish best served cold. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a big difference between the way the energy expresses. So, but in the United States chart, we have our Mars in Gemini very close to where Trump's Sun and Uranus and North Node in Gemini is. So he gets a lot of bang for his buck from this Mars position. He likes to be aggressive. He likes to fight. He likes to pick a fight. He likes to counterpunch. And it's also, Mars tends to be associated with the use of male energy, whether that's good use of male energy or misuse of male energy. And again, I think he tends to misuse it. Now, Neptune stands in general for um, the thing that most of us dream would come true. It is on some level iconic, kind of holy grail of what we wish our lives would be like, or we wish we would have. It is the dream maker, the myth maker, what we hold in the highest regard, what we romanticize, idealize, what wrongly or rightly makes us captivated. People like Hollywood people make great use of Neptune because they make amazing films. You go to a film, you suspend your sense of disbelief when you're in a good film. You lose track of regular reality, and they give you great illusion, right? But if you continue to take that step down, living in an alternate reality, you can't do that very far. You basically end up with issues around fiction.
Mm-hmm.
What fictions have you created? Through what set of lies have you created them? So whereas at the higher levels, Neptune can be very spiritual and very beautiful. At the lower levels, it is can be quite negative. So um, some of the things that Neptune very much is associated with in terms of American mythology, it's in the ninth house. The ninth house is associated with travel, higher education, um, law, as it is written rather than as it is practiced. So where you what you believe in terms of going for the truth and sort of higher concepts, high, and also intuition. And when you put Neptune in that position, you want to pull down boundaries
Mm-hmm.
in the world and make us live in one world. One world, one vision. So we want to tune into when we tune into Neptune, we can see something like the Statue of Liberty. Give us your poor, give us your sick, give us your wretched people, and we will help them. We will, and many of us followed that ideology to these shores on some level, whether because some of us were escaping famine or other people were wanted more opportunity or whatever the reasons were. When you see a sort of sick child, or when you see a wounded animal, some of these sad little commercials on TV about giving
Yeah.
money to the poor little dogs and
Mm-hmm.
cats that have
Yeah.
been abused. This is the Neptune world,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So it is a very, on the higher levels, it creates a sense of compassion for your fellow man, sensitivity. You're able to feel someone else's pain. On the lower levels, again, it operates differently. So when you put Neptune and Mars together, they don't operate all that well because Neptune, normally, you experience it most when you fall in love. You suspend reality about that other person. You believe they are divine. You believe that they embody all the great things. You want to believe every good thing about them. And then you realize that, they're a real person with real flaws over time, right? So, Neptune can sort of, when you're falling in love, can give you grief, love, sadness, ecstasy, all those sort of intense emotions, sort of maelstrom, is very much connected to Neptune. Now, also, Neptune is very connected to victim relationships. So when people are trying to save someone, it's often you're saving someone who's ill or saving someone who's underprivileged or in some way helping them, but also people who have victimization kind of mentality. And so the problem is a lot of people get worried about the famous Trump base, and they kind of, a lot of them fell in love. Some of them were believers in his, no matter whether we think they're wrong, they shouldn't have believed him or whatever, they fell in love with him on some level because he represented something, or he made the illusion and he said the lies that made them believe the romantic vision that he was presenting them of a world that was different, right, than the world that we actually live in. So, it's really hard to get someone who's in love with the wrong person to recognize they're in love with the wrong person. Have you ever tried to do that? It's not easy. You say, well, this guy also doesn't pay his bills, or this guy, has a kind of weird background. He beat up on his, last wife or something like that, and they won't believe it. They literally will not believe it. So I think what you have with Neptune is drinking the Kool-Aid. And it is on the lower levels has a cult-like quality. On the higher levels, it's very spiritual, so that you can come together with other people who are great believers in benefiting mankind, and come together and serve and create charitable organizations that help the poor, help the sick, all this kind of stuff. So it can be basically either side of the equation. But when you put the two together, Neptune and Mars, which is what we have in the United States chart, Mars tries to be independent and assertive and look after its own interests. On some level, it's kind of America first, a little bit. And Neptune wants to connect and have you recognize the bonds that we all share as human beings. And the fact that it asks us basically to love others unconditionally. And that is hard to hold together, this part of you that wants to be independent and do your own thing, and then recognize that actually, no, we also have an obligation to look at the fact that there are other people that are in pain, and can we help them in some way? So the common bond and the sensitivity that Neptune can bring makes you feel other people's pain. And on the higher levels, you think about the fact that there are a lot of people, for example, who sacrifice themselves to help others, sacrifice time with their family to help others. A lot of people work incredibly long hours for very little pay, not necessarily a lot of glory, because they feel that they're doing the right thing, or perhaps because they're very Christian. There's a very strong Christian element associated with the mythology of Neptune, because it often is to do with the kind of sacrifice that sometimes you have to make in order to be a better person, or in order to help the world. And there's often a personal price that needs to be paid. Mars doesn't feel comfortable paying that personal price. Also, when these planets come together, often there's a mythology about the fact of, well, we should set things right, or we should fight with other people in order to get people to believe what we believe and follow our lead. And that can bring us into war situation or conflict. And often with Mars and Neptune together, you can deploy your troops into the wrong direction. You can pull back your troops when you need to have them go forward. So it's a worrisome aspect when it comes to things like conflict, and particularly in things like the military. How are you going to deal with people who very well might sacrifice their lives for the decisions you've made. And if as Neptune starts to work in a negative way, it can be very confusing. You don't know what to do. Now, Trump has a very strong connection between his Mercury, which is his mind, and Neptune. So for him, he likes to create worlds of illusion. On some level, he is a confused person with kind of poor judgment, or judgment that is influenced by unconscious forces over which he has no control. So when he comes into the equation, and he comes in very strongly on Mars Neptune, it can be quite problematic, and particularly in the case of when he gets angry about something or he wants to assert himself about something. There's this tendency toward lack of compassion. He's much more Mars. He doesn't bring Neptune in to soften it, at least not on the higher levels. He brings it in on the lower levels and lies about it. So so basically, when we have a big Neptune transit coming up, we want to look at things like, are there a lot of lies that are going on at the time? Probably, because we're in the middle of a Trump presidency. Are there conspiracy theories going on? Because those are very important at these times. Is there gaslighting going on? Classic gaslighting. Is there a warping of reality? And then so some of the things we can expect when Mars and Neptune come together, things like holy wars, when people want to go to war for their beliefs or because they feel strongly. Neptune is all about how you feel. It has very little logic associated with it. It's not at all. Or anger related to love or idealization. You know, some guy who picks up an Uzi because he's been, you know, rejected by a girl that he cared about, and he decides he's going to take his hurt out on other people, right? Sometimes you marshal your forces in the wrong direction. Sometimes you idealize violence. I think the NRA is very related to this Mars-Neptune aspect, and the fact that there's almost an idealization of aggression through looking at guns and what it has done, you know, in our country's past and present, obviously. It also can be very much related to the plight of refugees, the tragedy of war, you know, things like what's happening to the Kurds right now, things like what happened to the people at the border, still probably happening there. So, you know, I think the things that I would like to look at on the following dates are, what type of Neptune experiences are we likely to have? Is this going to be the kind of situation where we're going to get an understanding? I think as we start to go through some of these Neptune aspects, I think some of Trump's base or some of Trump's supporters will start to see who he really is. That the veil will start to be lifted. Because as much as you can gaslight and create conspiracy theories and all this kind of stuff, eventually it becomes absurd. It's eventually when you realize, you know, that the guy that you're dating maybe isn't so fabulous. You know, all of a sudden something starts to click. And so that was what I thought would be interesting that we could look at, because this is going to have relevance not only for how the Congress, you know, the Senate, the House are going to vote on impeachment or pressure him to leave, or however it happens, right? The more that his base starts to diminish, the more likely it is that that will happen more quickly. So I wanted to look at some of the dates and look at what kinds of experiences are we going to see. Some of those dates connected to a diminution of support around his base. Some of them, are they going to be connected, for example, to issues with refugee problems or military issues, the things that I've described. So I would sort of put in broad categories, I would say is he going to be very confused? I mean, I think as Neptune gets closer and closer to his sun and Uranus, he is going to get less and less tethered to reality. I think he always has difficulty with it because I think he prefers to live in an alternate reality. But I think as we get this planet Neptune approaches closer and closer to both our Mars Neptune as a country and Trump's planets, that tethering to reality is going to become thinner and thinner, and it's going to be harder for him to either know cognitively. So, for example, he maybe won't be able to remember people's names. I mean, he can't do that now sometimes, right? So there's going to be a cognition element for him where he starts to lose that. So, could that be possibly 25th Amendment, or could that be, he's ill and he has to leave? Is it going to be something along those lines, which can be always something that happens with Neptune, is that there's an illness that starts to take over, and you have to retreat, fall back. Or is it going to be something where he launches an ill-considered military campaign or does something to the military that's connected to some lie he's told, or some hustle he's trying to create, or con he's trying to create in the background, and that comes back to haunt him? Or is it something to do with his base? So I would say, is it going to be him, his state of mind? Is it going to be military, or even like refugees and things of that nature, where he wants to sort of become independent and not be compassionate, or he's confused about what direction to take the military in? So that's another category. Or is it going to be more his base? So those are kind of the three sort of areas that maybe will come up. And let me give you some of the dates that we're talking about. The first date is in November.
Is it because I see here your notes, Victoria, November 13th through 22nd,
Right.
and then December 20th to 27th, and then January 2020 to February 2020. Is that right? Is that it?
Right. Those
Okay.
are the 4 dates. Yeah.
So can I now that just comment on some of the things you have said, because
Right.
let me know if because before I get into it, I would like to make sure that, because I'm already kind of in other words, I want to make sure that the things I'm connecting with are related to Neptune and all the things you've described. So there is indeed, okay, so the thing about the illusion, and I'll just a little bit more information about his base, and it also, because it connects, now there's something I discovered or whatever, like a couple of weeks ago or a week ago, that there's an interesting connection between the base and the refugees, because they really love the Kurds. The evangelical Christians are very much pro-Kurds in every sense. And they don't budge on that. Like, they just seem to be very strongly pro that, no matter what. And so what happens is that if there's the fall from grace, let's call it that, and the acknowledgement of the reality, let's say it, I think it could very well be that the base, because they see what happens with the Kurds, and I feel like they actually have connections there with the Kurds. They have the people that they talk to, and something, right? There could be some of them even still there, Americans, I don't know. Then they know what's really going on, and they're like, wait, but you're saying this and you're doing that. Something's not right. They're not. So I think that's one way. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, and I think may connect to the military, is that I feel like, and I wanted to ask you this before I even ask the question, because that's kind of how I see, especially the last dates when you says here, conflict, military action. What I think has happened, obviously, Trump has done a lot of things to help the Russian military in the last couple months, I think, especially. He's been doing his whole presidency. But he does that by lying, by saying, oh, no, we just need to have a cooperation agreement or whatever. He bullshits, gaslights people into saying, and then somehow the whole thing with Syria happened. It was a victory for Russia. And recently there was this thing with the cyber, like, oh, let's have a cyber cooperation. Let's have this. And they're pushing it and pushing it, pushing it. And what I think, because I do have a connection with, I always see the thing with the military, and why do I always see it at his end? I always see it. And now that we're having this conversation and I'm listening to you talk, I'm like, oh, maybe it has to do with uncovering and unmasking how he has used the military, the US military, to achieve the goals of Russians. And then at some point, because, it's like, okay, so you're using the military to do these things that help Russians. And at some point, you can't, like, it's going to crash, because you can't have the enemy, and you know what I mean, you can't have situation. It's going to come to a point where it's already happening, where either the military is going to have to really push Russia away from I feel like there could, could be infiltrated into the military, or where we're put in a position where they are attacking us because they get closer and closer and closer, and then we have to kick them back or something, and then the whole bullshit falls apart. You know what I mean? Because Trump has, and a lot of the right-wing people, know, witting it or wittingly, they actually believe that Russia is the ideal, the Neptune. Like, oh, look at the ideal of the white race, and like we can be together no matter what. It's the Christian world that comes. They believe that, and so when they realize that the Kurds are dying, they're bombs everywhere, and that the I feel like at one point, boom. We have to push back, not because anybody chooses, but because it's inevitable. That's what it feels like. So is that kind of like all these things are sort of connected?
I think you're on the right track there.
Okay. So yeah. So then, now that we talked about it, and then I'm going to ask, so what's going to happen as far as those Neptune concerns? What is it about the Neptune that's going to come up? So let's do now. Is it okay? Now that we're talking about
right,
let's do the dates.
So now let's look at those dates.
The dates.
The first one is going to be that Rosie's going to look into is November 13th, the period November 13th to the 22nd, when Venus is contacting Mars Neptune. And often Venus represents either allies in our relationships or money.
So I just want interesting. Okay, so interesting change, theft, work. Okay, so it's like a little messy to look at this way, but so first it's like then again, a question of Neptune. This is moving on from disappointment. This is making a decision. So it's sort of like it's a mental process. So I feel like right away my sense is that it has more to do with the quote unquote the idea of the base, or that people are having to make a decision about the disappointment that they've had. They can't look away because fortunes are going down. And I feel like it suggests that there's more tensions in the world, and that there's hard, like stuff about the economy may come up. And now what's interesting here, we have a letter. And what is the letter? Impeachment. This is a card in French. It says impeachment. So that is impeachment. Okay, upside down. When it's upside down, it's even said, I remember I wrote, it can't, obstacles may end in violence, or in other words, it doesn't necessarily mean that it means that it's violence, but obstructions that can't be overcome. Like it's a final ending. That's like there's an obstruction on your path, and you can't turn around. And this is negative gossip. It could be trolling and and sort of like. But what is interesting is that here we have to change. The card of change. There's definitely significant change because of theft related to work. So what I think it really happens is that people have to come to terms with the fact that this is not working, and that they have to. I feel like what I sense here is that it's almost like the people that say they were supportive of Trump. You were really the connection they have. That's exactly what you're saying, and you put it so well, Victoria, because it's very hard to explain why they connect to Trump. But this was like they had this like amazing, passionate connection to him, because they believe that was right, like exactly the Neptunes. They believe in the ideal, that we have this, the vision of this world, or it was like this kind of like almost like a blind faith in him. But when the letter is delivered, and it shows that it's not that it just shows that, it's like they look at the evidence and it's very damaging, but also that things are bad for them. Like, it's sort of like, for example, exactly what we see the example of the woman who, like, even I, like, oh, I love this guy, but then you realize, oh, maybe he has a girlfriend, huh? So it's kind of like, oh, I guess, you know, or he said like a guy was like, I want to date. Oh, I'm like, I'm separate. Look, I'm divorced, but I'm separate. You know, those kinds of things. Oh, but so when something that hurt, you realize, oh, these two things can't be true at the same time. You know, you can't be like doing all these. It's like, but I feel like they are hurt in some other way. Things are turning, things are going badly from the perception of those people. And here we have this is an important card of change. Change when this card comes, and I remember I was actually writing about this sort of set of cards. In the 19th century, change was rare. You rarely moved. And when change came in life in some significant, it was very significant. It wasn't minor. It was like, oh, it's not like today, like, oh, I'll go find another job or do something. Like, it was like, it's still, you still live in the same place. Or like when change happened, then it was big. So that's what it is. I feel like it shows that the Trump affects them in a way that may also affect their work or jobs, or like we're seeing the truth about the economy may come out. So it's like it's a set of circumstances that when the truth comes out, it illuminates number. I for some reason I feel like it's reality, like it affects the reality of those people who up to now have believed them. You know what I mean? So it's not so much that you say, okay, I'm trying to think here of like, let's say, like, okay, an example like Tiger Woods, like, oh, Tiger Woods, wow, he's a great golfer. And then when like the truth came out about him, how he cheated on his like beautiful wife with all these women, like it didn't affect us. Maybe you don't like him anymore, or like Lance Armstrong or something, you know, like, oh wow, the person is fake. They won by cheating. It's upsetting, but it doesn't affect you. But the thing with Trump, it affects them because they realize there's a problem with the economy, that they can't, it's like it affects their reality in some way. So that is how I feel like this whole thing
Yeah.
is
And I
materialized
also
in the
kind
beginning.
of slightly wonder, as you're speaking, the other thing that might come up, and I'm not quite clear where it is in the courts, but I know that some part of the Justice Department, Trump DOJ, is looking to overturn elements of Obamacare that may have negative impact on the people's health and well-being, because Neptune is also very associated with health and well-being. So that's another possible area. I don't know.
Do you want me to ask? Should I ask
Sure.
if is then Supreme Court going to overturn elements connected to Obamacare around this time or connected to the dates mentioned? Oh, the devil. And I was mentioning the other day, the devil, can you believe he's orange? Isn't that strange? He's orange and he has like this hair. Like, isn't that funny? Like, I don't know when this was designed, but it's a long time ago. They didn't know. It's kind of strange, you know, he's orange. Interesting. Lies about money and I think this is the Empress or women, like women in general, the Empress, like it stands for everything related to women. But interesting. Oh, you know what I think? I feel like the abortion stuff more than
Roe v. Wade instead of,
yeah, more than necessarily health. Okay, but we'll see more. Here, this is the gamblers. That's like this group of people. There's a woman here and then the gift. Okay, so, but let's see. So the question is this related to this is payments, success, a long way. I don't, honestly, I feel like what it suggests here, the devil is a strong card, okay, but it kind of is actually in some ways like you're saying. I think of the devil in those sort of the tarot ways as a bit more the connection between sort of like you're saying. No, it's not Pluto, but it's all about illusion. So, but it's illusion on a very big scale, right? So you create the illusion to drag people along, and what it shows is there's a finances in women. So there's a connection here so no, I don't necessarily feel like it's telling you much about,
okay.
but I think it has to do with how he may have, you know, and we talked about sometimes how the finances and the sexual stuff, that could also be that he may have made money from, which is if he's truly connected to the Russian mob, it's a thing. I heard that, like, well, not I heard, you've read that, like, that's one of the things they do is human trafficking and prostitution. So it's possible that if he got money from them, but it's like, here's the money. There's a sense here, I think this could be, I have a feeling like there's going to be more uncovering of how he got money. The gift is exactly what we say, emoluments, right? It's like, I give you something in return for something else, and that is, here's the business deal that was made a long time ago. So
Right.
ultimately, that's, in a way, it kind of goes back to what, well, we didn't talk about it just now, but the last time I was looking at cards on this reading, that the truth about his money comes out. That's what it essentially suggests, right? The devil is like, it's even true. Like here, I lie through money. I use the money, and also this card of the Empress is also abundance. Like, it's, in other words, anything that is, for example, clothing or housing, or some, not just housing, but opulence in some way, right? So he used, everything was a lie. Okay, that's essentially what it's saying. There were deals made to make sure he kept up those appearances, but then finally we found out that these are gifts. In other words, there's something you have to pay back, right?
And I think an interesting point to make is you look at the Empress card specifically. The little shield has the Venus aspect.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Here.
And the devil has a number of aspects in astrology. Obviously, there is a Pluto dark side there, but the devil was also known as the father of all lies. That was one of his names. So the dark side of Neptune has that aspect of the devil connected to it. Yeah.
So I think it's like more of the uncovering of his,
of some of the financials too.
Yeah, like the fact that it's like, because it's sort of saying it's, and I think it's exactly what we said earlier. I've just been thinking about it. It's like, sort of like Trump was always like, no, but it was them, it was this, like that he would constantly find a scapegoat and then point here, point there. But eventually he was able, because he became president, he was able to direct some things in the way of illusion. But eventually the illusion has to clash with reality. At some point, nothing could go on like this forever, right? So it's not enough that he's just a mean person, but as you're saying, his entire presidency was built on on lies, not a lie, but it's all about trying to shift. But it's so interesting what you're saying, Victoria, now that I'm thinking that the connection between the sort of like Neptune and Pluto, right? Using power, but going about it in a very aggressive way through lies, right? Using the lies to advance the dark Pluto thing, which is interesting. Anyway, so should we go then to the other dates, the December, or unless you have other,
No, that's absolutely right.
Okay.
So the next set of dates, Rosie, if you could look at when the Sun contacts Mars and Neptune, and that is December 13th through 18th, that period.
Yeah.
The Sun generally shows the light of consciousness.
Okay. But I just wanted to make a note. I'm looking at your notes here, Victoria. I just before I move on to the next, because it's perfect. It says you said here, also will be stronger on November 13, 22, when Venus contacts Mars, Neptune, allies, and money. So as the cards were saying, actually the same thing is that there's this foreign money that's going to come out, and the connection between the foreign becoming getting alliances that come through money. In other words, right? I think not just our U.S. allies, but creating new alliances because of financial connections. So that's what it shows actually very well in the cards. Anyway, so now moving on to the December 20 to 27th, when Mercury contacts Mars and Neptune.
First, when the Sun contacts Mars, Neptune.
Oh, that's okay.
December 13th.
Here, yeah, because I changed the color of the font. Okay, so the Sun contacts Mars and Neptune, consciousness and light being shown on this matter. So what is it? Oh, interesting. Look, temperance. Very nice. Oh yeah, interesting. So it's kind of perfect, because here we have the angel temperance is basically balance and finding it. I think of it in some ways as karma on a bigger scale, in the sense that finally things balance out, or we have the final balance in some way. And what do we have? The theft. This is the theft card upside down, exposing the theft. So things are balanced out in terms of the theft. And here, this is interesting, restlessness, which I think it's a common. But before I started, how to say it, a long time ago, Victoria, when I first started the channel, even more like 18 months ago, starting like around that time, I would see that Trump would leave, but wouldn't be happy. People would be like, "Oh my God, it's so great." It's happy at first, but when people start realizing the depth of the corruption and it comes to light, there's a lot of restlessness. There's not something like, "Oh, great!" Like now, like it's finally, there's not desperation, but there's a lot of anger, I think, from people who, interesting, interesting anger. Yeah. So we have here, so then we have now news. So this is this part. And then we have now, this is interesting. This is, what is it? it's a the what's that legal term? Contempt. It's like a literally anger, but if you look at the woman's face, it's more contempt that it is anger. Okay, and the piece, right? So it's, and it's like that kind of expression. And this is the man. I think this could be Jared and Ivanka. Okay, so, and then faithfulness to, I just feel like in the sense there's contempt, and I think could be contempt of court. So as this, my sense is, as all of this comes out and everything is, you can't deny, it's undeniable, right? The same thing with the Ukraine. At some point, there's so much evidence, you can't, what are you going to say? It's obvious. So everything is coming out. There was this balancing of truth. And then you have this situation where, at the same time, I feel like, so when this truth comes out, it's sort of like the rats, they try to escape, or, you know what I mean? Or they don't go to court, or as Trump has already been doing now, but it's pushed to a much bigger level. Okay, I think. And it's like, it's not as if they're like, okay, I get it, I'm gonna go to court, I understand. Okay, no, they just, either they try to run, or they're just see here. So what is December 20 to 27? So okay, so was that right? Okay, oh, I'm sorry, no, I made a mistake. 13th to, okay, was that right? 13th to 18th, this was the sun contacting Mars. And okay, 13. Okay, so what's happening then? Yeah, they still, it's so interesting. I see the image I see here is a huge flashlight. It's, imagine here if you have a normal human scale flashlight, and then you have a dollhouse, and this Ivanka and Jared are in the dollhouse, and they're that size. So you have this huge light, and they're like trying to run away. No, I'm not going. No, I'll be right back. Or they tries to go to Israel, and like I think they try to escape. Once those people, once they're really exposed and they realize there's no way out, you start really seeing they have a reaction. The reaction is to try to escape, evade. It's like escape, but it's sort of like you're saying, like escape. It's not escapism. It's like yeah, really trying to escape. I'm not going to go to court. I'm not going to do what I'm supposed to do, because they're going to lose, and they can only deal with the. And that is what is a little bit strange here, is that they'd rather die in some cases than have to face the light. I feel, in every sense, when the truth comes, they're not there for it. They have to. That's why it's so fascinating that it's almost like it's in their constitution, in their mind or something, that once the truth comes out, they just can't be there. They can't look at it. They can't look at the situation in the eye, or either admit to it, or negotiate, or be present. They just can't be present. And so these people try to escape, and that is part of, I get here too, it's part of the reason when we're talking about the base feeling disillusionment, is that when their turn comes, they try to run, and they're not really, there's no dignity to them, or any, right? It's like you could even look at Michael Cohen. There was something dignified about some of them when they're like, okay, I made a mistake, I'm going to serve my time. Instead, they're like, no, it doesn't apply to me. I was right. I did the right thing, or right. So, so that's my sense. Okay. So should we go to December 27th when Mercury contacts, right?
Yeah.
So
Mercury contacts Mars, Neptune. It's news, definitely, or a decision, and Mercury, and it's often communication, news, decision. I kind of curious.
Yeah, so kind of interesting. You know what? Oh my God, I'm kind of excited here. So Victoria, let me just get the cards out, and then I'm going to do the next. I'm going to select the cards for the next dates right now too, because I already see something very significant connected to Putin. Because I feel like the thing because you say here that said there's like December this is the time of the news in this week of December 2027, and then January 28th, then you have the Mars Neptune, could be military action. But because I already see what I saw here is that there's greater movement to punish maybe Russia, even kind of suddenly. And then if interesting, if yeah. Military, interesting. So oh my God, I'm happy now. I'm so So excellent. Okay, so I'm like, hmm. Oh my God, because I can't. You know, we're all tired. It's like, so okay, so now this is a really interesting card because this is the Queen of Swords. It stands for. It could also be a woman that has these qualities, but generally, uh, the basically using your mind in a way that is fair and balanced. Could be somebody in the legal profession, but that sort of mindset or that atmosphere of truth, basically balanced truth and making it could very well be legal decision or coming to terms with what the facts are. Okay, and then we have this card, the Emperor. I always see it as Putin. Okay, and it's upside down, so it's as if there's a legal decision when it comes to Putin. Okay, and what is it about? This is weakness that puts him in a position of weakness, which I would think, you know, well, he's like, oh, hey, man, what's up? Like, he's been very happy with everything he's been doing with Trump and everything, like, you know, violating norms constantly and pushing boundaries until now. And this is what is this? This is the wedding. But in all those cards that have to do with wedding, it's always about business deals. Because as you probably know, marriage, of course, no, marriage as a romantic enterprise is a new thing. But so anyway, so this is, they're looking at deals and it's something unexpected. And what is unexpected about Putin, right? The Russian oligarchs. And what is great here is the woman, she's surprised. Oh, look, oh, it's just like, what happened? So it's great because something comes up, not out of nowhere, but suddenly there's a decision to do something and then more. So then here again, the card of the gift, right? Receiving a gift. So they're looking at how Trump, or there's a way in which this is a false person. There's a way in which they may have put Trump in power, and there's a lot of money here. And it's surprised how there's so much money connected to Putin or Russia. So I feel like for some reason, you know what it makes me think, this conjunction here makes me think of how they are now investigating the campaign donations. The Trump campaign, this is yet another thing of the finances that, of course, it could come out in the case that we were talking about, the Mazars, right? But I also, this is the thing I even forgot because there's so much, right, Victoria? It's also that when, you know, they're saying that, for example, there's already also on Twitter the evidence that those guys, the Ukrainian guys, they were giving money to a candidate. Like somebody, it was a complicated, somebody found a financial transaction where it's another person, not one of them, on their behalf gave money to the Florida governor, the current one, Ron DeSantis. So this is the thing. It's like you find out that there's all this money involved in, like, this is interesting because this is a lot of money, but you see they're gambling. In other words, this could be, I think of it, could be illegal money, but it's always a lot of money. So there's the weakness of the Russians comes out when their money is legally recognized as being illegal and as being in our system. So see what I'm saying? So it's like there's a decision or and I feel like because of this card here, I do think that there's a legal element to this, or law enforcement comes out saying that there's all this illegal money connected to Russia, and that this is, you know, this puts them in a weak position because it's exposed. It's like you're saying, it comes after the exposure, the initial exposure of like the Mars Neptune, but it all comes out. It's the truth, you know. It's like boom, there it is, you know. And then the fact that it should have the weak card here, it suggests that there is measure, something is done that to put them in that position. Not just that the information comes out, but that then it weakens their position. In other words, something happens. And now then let's move to then January 28th. We have here the stars, meaning getting what you want, starting to take action in something, and the family upside down, or the country upside down, or something related to the family of the country. And then here a lot of, sorry, stuttering, but here a lot of money again. So it's a card of a lot of money upside down, so shady money. Then we have a woman, you know, whenever there's like a woman, I'm like, I need more than that. So victory upside down. So the discovery of the shady money connected to the victory upside down, what is it? The election, okay? And then the military. Now the military is interesting because the military a lot of times has to do with law enforcement, not just depending on whether it's upside down or upright or down. I think of it as, to me, I see it in this case, it looks very much like that law enforcement is doing the right thing. It's not, you know, if you were upside down, I would think, oh, that it's the military, it's the attack against us. But in this case, I feel like the law enforcement discovers the connection between the money that was put into the elections. And now the fact that you have these very positive cards here suggests that we are on the right path and that we have already exposed them. And this is the marriage, the house, the White House, right? And the ideas, the thoughts are like what's on his mind. So there's a discovery that already happened in the month before here of the money belonging to the Russians coming into the elections. And then there is the actions. And then people are happy or on the right path of removing this money, or not removing, but doing some sort of like the law enforcement being involved in this money, like taking it away or dealing with it. So does it make sense,
Oh,
Victoria?
totally makes sense. Yeah, I think the one thing that also occurred to me, and this is interesting only because again, we've all been following this Ukraine story, and actually this guy Firtash is fighting extradition actually to Chicago. That's
Oh,
where
that's right.
he's meant to be facing his
Mm-hmm.
criminal trial. I wonder if also he may lose that at some point in the near future. And I mean, it could be through one of these lower level guys who gives up the big guy. But what happens if Firtash is brought to the U.S. and who knows? But anyway, so yeah, I mean, I think that this idea of the fact that by that February date, it looks like we're on the right path and we're going, which would fit with the fact that I'm thinking Trump's going to be leaving potentially in January. It feels like we're starting to either freeze Russian assets, or we're
Exactly.
putting
Exactly.
sanctions, or we're doing something in an active way because of
Yeah.
what we discovered in December, really.
Yeah. Because
Um,
no, just say it, Victoria, and then I'll say it. Just
no, that's it.
finish what.
That's all
Yeah.
I was going to say.
Yeah. No, because as you were saying this, Victoria, I was thinking the same thing, that I was also going to reiterate that what it suggests is that, you know what, for example, when you see the news that comes out from those, you go on like the Southern District, press release room or something, they always such and such did this, did that, did that. And it's not, they're not the news. They're just saying why they were indicted. But by the time this becomes public, there's actions connected to the information coming out. In other words, it's not just a piece of news. It's like, okay, here's a consequence. So the same feeling I get here is that it reminded me very much of the time when Obama, right before he left, he enacted these sanctions. He did the sanctions, right? More sanctions. And so something to that effect. We're saying we have this. So now what I'm seeing here and hearing you talk, Victoria, reminds me of why. Because then everybody asks, so why hasn't he left, or why, what are they waiting for? Or how come the Republicans are not indicted, and all these things? And now it makes perfect sense, because I see here, from what the card suggests, is that the very big thing when they talk about it, it's not as if, for example, there was one case of one person. It's as if, oh, here's the web of all the Russian money that has come into the elections, and there's like dozens of people indicted. That's my sense about it. No, it's not. Once they make it public, it's like, here's the entire web of corruption, like, because obviously all these people. So how was it? They say, oh, those people started these PACs and they have been sending money to Republicans. The Republicans were fine with it, and then the hackers come. The hackers did this, did that, because we know that there's investigations going on. Mueller talked about it. He said he passed it on to other people. And there's a clear connection between the financial support of the Republicans and the use of the hackers, and then Trump changing the government to do whatever Russia wants. So then, if you putting all of it together, if you're going to do something, you have to kick the Russians out, and at least indict the Americans that are connected to this, right? Because you can't just be like, oh, hello, Trump is president. Hi, I found out that these Russians, they really were putting money. Like, you can't. It's like, right? Knowing how powerful he is and how much he has done, how much harm he has done, there's no way that you can safely know. And then I'm also saying, as I say this, Victoria, comes up an image of Mueller and how they've learned from the Mueller investigation to not make this. Oh, it's interesting. When you make this stuff public, and don't do anything, they get stronger. Because it's like, oh, they know this stuff, they're not going to do anything, great, I'm going to continue to do it. And so you can't make, they're saying you can't make this stuff public unless you have a real sealed, like, indicted all these people. So that is, it's kind of like they're preparing. My sense is that behind the scenes, like you're saying, the good Pluto people, right, they're preparing this huge, very tight thing against all of the people that, so are they, is there a relationship between the Firtash? Is he going to come to the U.S.? Is he going to escape? What's going to happen? Is the Firtash thing connected? Is he going to, what's going to happen with that? They can't, they're trying to free him. They can't do it right now because, oh, of course, it's already come out, Victoria, this stuff now makes perfect sense. Firtash was waiting for the moment when they would, scapegoat the other Ukrainians to say, oh no, but they are, look at them, they're horrible people. Oh, that makes perfect sense. They wanted to get the legal argument that those people, the ones that were not helping the Russians, were the bad people in Ukraine. And once that, if they were able to get, oh, that's right, because they're saying if you can get the people, if the U.S. can use their strength to convince the people in Ukraine to create fraudulent documents that say that they helped Biden, then I get freed, because then Barr could come up with the argument that says, well, I'm sorry, we're going to have to stop this extradition because it's not connected. There's something like he was arrested wrong, even though the case is unrelated to the Russians, like an Indian company. I remember the story of Chicago, the reason why he was indicted. But I feel like there's a connection there. If they were able to create a false narrative that becomes a legal narrative with all these false documentation, that it was Ukraine that did a bad thing, that it was Ukraine that was involved with all of this, then they could try to free everybody related to this Russian thing, because they'll say, no, it's a lie. They were there. It was unfair. He was arrested because there was a fake investigation into Russians or somebody. You know what I mean? So if they could flip the story, then they could free him. But I don't think they have but that was the plan.
Yeah.
So did you see this part, Victoria? This is about the news, okay? That the guys that came out yesterday, the guys that were arrested, Ukrainian guys, they were arrested on the way to preparing the oligarch Firtash for an interview. No, was it Ukrainian prosecutor who was corrupt to interview with Hannity. You see what I'm saying? So like they were already preparing the ground to say, oh no, but I know there was a problem there with Biden is a horrible person. He is. No, don't believe them. No. So that's what the guys were going to do. They're going to help this guy prepare for interview with Hannity. And I was like, oh, what? The whole plan is not, because that was I think the Russians, that was their big like dream. It was like, no, we're going to blame everything on Ukraine, and that would justify our invasion of Ukraine, and that would just say that, no, they did it. They did it. They did it. Like, it's horrible, but that's what it is. And I think they're not able, because, it's like exactly what you're saying, Victoria. It's like at some point, it's absurd. It gets to the point of absurdity, and especially, oh, I'm sorry, but they're arrested, huh? The people they were going to help with the interview, they're arrested? How do you explain that? At some point, you can't, right? What do you say to that? So that makes sense. Yep. So I think, in other words, their whole, because they're saying the whole thing with the Ukraine, it was a way, because Trump works for the Russians. The Russians wanted to clean up their name, okay, and the world stage, clean up their name, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work, and it ultimately backfires, because you see what I'm saying? This was the last ditch. Like, oh, we're gonna bring it back or grab it, and then it's like, what? Oh no! And then the truth, you know what I mean? The truth comes out, and I feel like I even like Sean Hannity. Oh, is it involved? What? No, but it's perfect, because you realize like they're all very deeply involved in this, and they're all, because it serves them to say that the Russians are great, because seriously, Victoria, the plan is to really come here and take over. You know what I mean? I really think that if Trump were allowed to be in government for 5 more years or whatever, next thing you know, now we have a co-president, President Putin. Yeah, he's here, and everybody learn Russian, and right, like, don't you think? That to me seems very obvious.
Well, I mean, I think the thing with Neptune is that it is conspiracies theories, which are
Mhm.
debunked and not real.
Uh-huh.
But it's also conspiracies.
Right. Mhm.
Neptune also stands for spies, intelligence, being undercover, actual literal conspiracies. So to me, that Mars Neptune is about a conspiracy to attack the United States.
Mhm.
That's what one of the things the Russians sort of clued into.
Mhm.
And what's interesting about Neptune really is also it stands for democracy.
Oh, interesting. That's nice.
And Mars is about an attack of democracy, right?
Oh.
Because Mars stands for
Mm.
the rule of the people. It's the
Mhm.
people, and the people that are in Washington are our public servants. They serve the people. They serve you. They serve me. They serve all your viewers.
Mhm.
We do not serve them. So I mean, I think in Trump world, in Trump's mind, he would like everybody to think he's an emperor
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
a king
Yeah.
or
Mhm.
whatever, and take us back 240 years, but he isn't. And the position is different than what he anticipated. I mean, obviously a lot of people think that he really didn't want the position in the first place, but he's certainly making the best of it. But whether he did or he didn't, I mean, obviously the whole thing is built on a bed of lies and a conspiracy of some sort to get him elected, right?
Mhm.
Or to get him more power, to get him more position. What happens if he had lost the election, which was certainly possible given the fact his margin was so thin. And then he went on, for example, to create Trump TV, a whole sort of, kind of
Mhm.
what would you call it, propaganda. Propaganda is very Neptune.
Mm.
So Putin's chart, which maybe one day we'll look at, he's got like 4 planets in Neptune's house, which is the 12th house. And so he was a spy, he was a propagandist. He specialized in taking people and turning them. And it is a very much of an intelligence spy like, planet like Neptune can be turned against us, or we can use that Neptune to take us back to a truer state of democracy.
Mm.
That's kind of what I would like eventually to see.
Mhm.
Something where public servants are public servants and do things that don't serve their own interests, but that serve our interests, right?
Mhm.
And the good ones do it already, right? And we don't have to complain about them, but the other ones don't, right? So that's basically what I have to say. And I did want to mention, and maybe at some point we'll look at this and it'll all make sense in hindsight. But it's always kind of fun to project to see if we can, you know, hit it on the nose ahead of time. But to me, there's probably going to be several heroes of this um, story, and some of them are going to be Saturn type people who are probably either in law enforcement or maybe they're actually lawyers who are dealing with the actual legal ramifications and the law breaking
Mhm.
and trying to help restore this sort of balance, like your temperance card, right?
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
there's somebody else who's attacking the darkness, who's kind of the kind of the Batman figure, the kind uh, of dark Avenger kind of person, or someone who either that or somebody who like Bill Taylor or some of these people that came out despite the fact that
Mhm.
they
Mhm.
were told not to and went ahead and told the truth and came out and exposed something that was trying to be kept underground. And then I think there's going to be a Neptune type hero,
Mhm.
which typically is somebody, again, I always go back to myth for um, my explanations. There was, this famous myth of the Holy Grail. You're looking for the Grail because at least in the myth, you're trying to heal the kingdom. The kingdom is ill because the Grail King is sick.
Mhm.
So these knights from the Arthurian legends go off and try to find this Grail, and it's Parsifal, who's this young kid who really nobody expects it to be him. He's not sort of like a big strong man, or he's not like a necessarily a a legal mastermind or whatever, but he has a pure heart, pure intentions, and through a series of events, he comes along and he helps heal the kingdom because he is in the right place at the right time, and he creates a healing, or he helps to create a healing. So I think we're going to have somebody of that sort who's going to be a healer. It could very well be the next president, or it could be somebody who acts like that amongst the current, either on the Democratic or Republican side. It doesn't have to be a Democrat. It could be, for example, somebody who comes out who's very courageous on the Republican side and makes a very impassioned speech, pure of heart, and says, I can't vote for this. I can't vote for this. It could be anything like that. So I think we'll see a number of people. I think Schiff is probably one of the Neptune types. I believe he's Pisces. I could be wrong. And Pisces people tend to be Neptune-y. But it probably will be a number of people, each of whom will play their part to help, with this. And I think on the dark side, there will be, the Pluto villain, the Saturn villain, the Neptune villain, who is the propagandist. The propagandist, it's probably Stephen Miller, I would suppose, who works with all these creepy belief systems. But it could be somebody else, Barr could be the lawyer. I don't know. But, so there'll probably be, our cast of characters are interesting. It's a little bit harder unless you look at each individual's chart, which I'm not sure that we really actually want to do because that's very time consuming. Although we could look more deeply, for example, into Trump at a future time, or into Jared, or anybody you want to look at. But anyway, I just wanted to end with this thought that Neptune eventually will help us heal our democracy, and the people that come along that build a bridge to understanding and greater humanity, I think will come. But they're not the people that at the moment are the first line of defense. The first line of defense right now is Saturn and Pluto. And then it becomes Neptune, which helps rebuild and heal the damages that have been done. That would be my sense of how it's going to play out. So that's it on my side.
Wonderful. Yeah, this was it was really interesting, Victoria, because I feel like there was, of course, you couldn't cover everything last time, and I remember last time just the day that we did the reading after I had, it's like the next day, exactly the date that you had said something happened. It was the day when the thing about the Ukraine came up. One of the, I don't remember which date it was, but it was like right away, right there, and it kept happening. And I feel like this makes me happy because it feels like we are at the end, and it's like at the ending, the illusions fall, right? And that's what I think frustrates a lot of people. It's not just the crimes, but that Trump continues to lie without impunity. But eventually, the impunity is going to end. You know what I mean? Like it's going to come to a point where nobody's going to deny it anymore. So, right? Or even there could be a handful of people that deny it, but right?
Some true believers. I mean, like, let's face it. I mean, the sad thing, and you mentioned this earlier, the last time that a country went mad on some level was Germany. I mean, in a very clear way, under the Nazis, and a lot of them were born with Neptune and Pluto together in Gemini.
Oh, interesting.
So those two forces can be very positive and can be very dark. And so my sense is that, I mean, I think we're sort of dealing with a dark force, and under sort of underpinnings of our unconscious, the things that we've done that have not been good for us as a society. Many of the things, those things we have to deal with, like, for example, some prejudices, whether they be against African Americans or Hispanic people or women or whoever, everyone, because we have sort of very old underlying beliefs, and it's time to do some healing on a lot of those levels. And maybe some of this stuff had to get shaken up and come up out of the basement, and for us to look at it. So
yeah. Very interesting, Victor. And I'm so glad. I love it. I love our collaborations. No, I really do. I really do know. It's so fun. It's so interesting because we get into in depth. We look at things in depth. you know.
Yes. Thank you.
So no, it was great. So I'm gonna pause here, okay, the recording. Okay. All right. So okay. So that was it, guys. I had a great time with Victoria, and she'll come back late, another time. But it was a follow up to the first video we did together, which was really great. So I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.